The lights inside the arena in Kirov, Russia burned bright against the cold June night, as the crowd slowly rose to its feet for another chapter of IBA Champions Night. This was not just another undercard fight buried beneath flashing graphics and walkout music. This was a collision between two fighters carrying the pride of their nations into the ring. In the red corner stood Russia's own Dmitry Zakharov, a composed and dangerous technician fighting on home soil with the pressure of expectation pressing against his shoulders. Across from him stood Wang Lequan of China, calm-faced and unreadable, walking through the roaring hostility of the Russian crowd like a man who had already accepted the danger ahead. The announcer's voice echoed through the packed venue as the words 71 kilograms, 6 rounds, rolled across the speakers, and suddenly the atmosphere shifted. Every fan understood that this was not going to be a polite chess match. It was going to be a test of will. Zakharov entered first beneath a storm of cheers, draped in confidence, shadowboxing beneath the blue lights while cameras flashed from every angle. He looked sharp, disciplined and focused, the kind of fighter who understood how to break opponents down piece by piece. But Wang Lequan walked with a different energy, quiet, calculated, dangerous. He didn't waste movements, he didn't react to the crowd. He simply stared across the ring at Zakharov, as if the noise around him didn't exist. The tension between Russia and China inside that ring became visible, before a single punch was thrown. Trainers gave final instructions. Gloves touched briefly at center ring. Then the referee stepped back, the bell sounded through the arena, and 6 rounds of pressure, violence, and determination officially began beneath the unforgiving lights of Kirov. From the opening seconds, Dmitry Zakharov established the rhythm of the fight with sharp footwork and a disciplined jab that snapped through the air like a warning shot. Fighting in front of his home crowd gave him an extra layer of intensity, and every clean punch he landed was met with thunderous applause, echoing through the arena. Wang Lequan, however, refused to be overwhelmed by the moment. He stayed patient behind a tight guard, studying Zakharov carefully. The first round quickly transformed into a battle of styles. Zakharov used angles, movement, and quick combinations to dictate distance, while Wang attempted to slow the pace with measured counters aimed at the body. Every exchange carried tension because both men understood the consequences of giving ground too early. Midway through the round, Zakharov exploded forward with a crisp 3-punch combination that sent sweat flying under the bright lights, igniting the Russian fans into a frenzy. But Wang answered immediately with a brutal counter right hand that landed flush enough to silence the arena for a split second. It was the first sign that the Chinese fighter had come prepared for war. As the rounds continued, the tactical battle deepened. Zakharov's speed gave him moments of control, but Wang's timing kept dragging him back into danger. The corners shouted instructions between exchanges, while both men pushed through the pressure without hesitation. By the end of the second round, redness began forming around the faces of both fighters. Their breathing became heavier, their movements sharper. This was no longer a cautious feeling-out process. The fight had officially crossed into hostile territory, and the crowd in Kirov could sense that something dramatic was beginning to unfold inside those ropes. As the third round began, the pace intensified dramatically, and the technical contest slowly transformed into a brutal war of endurance. Dmitry Zakharov stepped forward aggressively, feeding off the energy of the Russian crowd that chanted his name with every advance. He doubled the jab, attacked the body, and forced Wang Lequan backward for the first sustained stretch of the fight. The pressure looked overwhelming at first. Zakharov's combinations were crisp, disciplined and relentless, landing with the confidence of a fighter determined to defend his territory. But Wang's resilience started revealing itself in dangerous ways. Instead of panicking, he absorbed the pressure, planted his feet, and fired back with compact counters that carried frightening precision. One sharp left hook near the rope suddenly changed the momentum of the round, snapping Zakharov's head sideways and forcing him to reset. The crowd gasped. Wang had found his opening. Suddenly the Chinese fighter grew bolder, stepping into range and exchanging punches directly in the center of the ring. The sound of leather cracking against skin echoed through the arena, as both men abandoned caution for moments of pure combat. Zakharov answered with a violent right hand to the body that visibly hurt Wang, but Wang responded seconds later with a straight right upstairs that drew blood from around Zakharov's nose. The tension inside the building became electric. Trainers screamed instructions from the corners, while fans stood on their feet, unable to sit down. By the fourth round, fatigue began creeping into both fighters' movements. Sweat poured from their bodies under the punishing lights, yet neither man was willing to surrender ground. Zakharov's aggression remained dangerous, but Wang's composure under fire became one of the defining stories of the fight. Every exchange now carried the possibility of changing everything in a single second. What began as a measured international contest had evolved into a desperate struggle between two men refusing to back away from pain. The championship atmosphere inside the arena reached another level during the fifth round as exhaustion and desperation collided in dramatic fashion. Dmitry Zakharov's face showed the physical cost of battle, but his eyes still burned with determination as he marched forward behind hard combinations. The Russian fighter understood the importance of these final rounds. Fighting at home meant expectations were enormous, and the crowd demanded a performance worthy of the occasion. Wang Lequan, meanwhile, looked remarkably composed, despite the punishment he had absorbed. His strategy had evolved beautifully throughout the fight. Instead of chasing Zakharov recklessly, he allowed the Russian to step into dangerous territory before answering with compact counters and disciplined defense. Early in the fifth, Zakharov unleashed one of his best sequences of the night, trapping Wang near the ropes and hammering the body with vicious hooks that forced the Chinese fighter to clinch for a brief moment. The arena erupted, sensing that the finish might be near, but Wang refused to break. He escaped the pressure and fired back with a sharp counter combination that immediately reminded everyone how dangerous he remained. The momentum shifted wildly from minute to minute. One moment Zakharov appeared in total control, driving forward behind combinations and crowd energy. The next moment, Wang answered with precise counters that slowed the Russian advance and forced hesitation into the exchanges. The physical punishment now became visible everywhere. Mouths hung open between combinations as both fighters searched for oxygen. Sweat and blood mixed beneath the lights, while the crowd roared with every clean shot landed. It was no longer about perfect technique. It was about heart, about survival, about proving who could endure more when the bodies screamed to stop. As the seconds of the fifth round disappeared, both fighters traded heavy punches in the center of the ring without retreating. The audience in Kirov responded with deafening applause, recognizing the courage unfolding directly in front of them. By the sixth and final round, the fight had become a dramatic test of pride, endurance, and mental strength. Every punch now carried the weight of the entire contest. Dmitry Zakharov rose from his corner breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling as the Russian crowd roared one final time behind their hometown warrior. Across the ring, Wang Lequan stood equally exhausted but mentally locked in, his expression calm, despite the punishment written across his face. The final bell sounded, and both men immediately met in the center of the ring, as if neither wanted the judges deciding the outcome. Zakharov pressed forward first, launching combinations with urgency, determined to finish strong in front of his supporters. Wang answered with disciplined counters and impressive composure, refusing to surrender under pressure. The exchanges became savage. Gloves crashed against cheeks, ribs, and foreheads, while the referee watched closely for signs of danger. Halfway through the round, Zakharov landed a crushing right hand that sent the crowd into absolute chaos. For a split second, Wang appeared hurt, stumbling backward toward the ropes. But instead of collapsing, the Chinese fighter fired back with one of his cleanest counters of the entire night, snapping Zakharov's head back and instantly reigniting the battle. It was the kind of moment that defined great fights, two exhausted men refusing to yield, even when every muscle in their bodies begged for rest. The final minute became pure warfare. Both fighters exchanged punches at close range, while the crowd stood screaming beneath the lights of the arena. Every second felt enormous. Every landed shot carried emotional weight. Then finally the bell rang. The war was over. Immediately the crowd erupted into applause as both men stepped away from each other battered, exhausted, and covered in the evidence of 6 unforgiving rounds. There was no hatred in their eyes now. The kind of respect that can only be earned through shared suffering inside the ring. As the fighters stood at center ring awaiting the official decision, the atmosphere inside Kirov felt heavy with anticipation. Fans waved flags, shouted predictions, and replayed the dramatic moments in their minds, while both corners tried desperately to convince themselves they had done enough. Dmitry Zakharov stared ahead, with bruises across his face, and sweat still dripping from his chin, while Wang Lequan remained composed beside him, breathing slowly as though mentally replaying every exchange from the fight. The announcer finally stepped forward with the scorecards in hand, and silence swept across the arena. 6 rounds earlier, these two men had entered the ring carrying ambition, pressure, and national pride. Now they stood transformed by combat itself. Regardless of the decision, both had proven something important beneath those lights. Zakharov had shown the relentless aggression and fighting spirit expected from a Russian contender performing before his home crowd. Wang Lequan had demonstrated remarkable discipline, resilience, and courage against hostile territory and constant pressure. The final verdict echoed through the speakers as one fighter's hand was raised high above the other, triggering cheers from one side of the arena and disappointment from the other. Yet even in defeat, neither man truly left the ring empty-handed. They had delivered a fight built on respect, toughness, and heart, the very foundation of boxing itself. Cameras flashed as the victorious fighter climbed the ropes to salute the crowd, while the defeated warrior quietly nodded in acknowledgement, understanding he had been part of something unforgettable. On a summer night in Russia, under the bright lights of IBA Champions Night, Dmitry Zakharov and Wang Lequan gave the fans more than just 6 rounds of boxing. They gave them drama, they gave them tension, They gave them a story of two fighters crossing national borders and personal limits in pursuit of victory. And long after the arena emptied and the lights faded into darkness, the echoes of that battle remained alive in Kirov.